Hey, what's up? It's Greg. Welcome to the channel. I'm continuing this series that I started a few weeks ago called Uncut Friday, where I talk about various different topics that may go a little bit off the beaten trail of what we normally talk about on this channel. We normally talk about business and investment. What I'm going to talk about this week is very timely in the sense that it's been in the news recently, and it's regard to what's going on in Texas, and it relates to the renewable energy topic that many people are talking about. And I want to just delve into this a little bit because I know a little bit more about this subject than probably most people. I've related to everybody in past videos that I worked on Wall Street for many years, and I happen to be involved for over 15 years in the energy business. I financed power plants, and the firm that I was at on Wall Street was actually one of the early pioneers in alternative energy, renewable energy, whatever you want to call it. And during my career there, I financed many different types of power plants, conventional and working for utilities and independent power producers. And over the course of my career there, I financed, for example, geothermal projects, which is the most wonderful form of renewable energy because it's energy and heat that comes directly out of the earth to drive turbines and create electricity. So I financed those types of facilities. I also actually financed the world's largest solar energy project in the Mojave Desert, called the 𝐦𝐨𝐬 project for Florida Power and Light. That was not panels, solar panels like you see today. This was actually mirrors which focused the rays of the sun onto a tube that contained fluid, which heated up beyond boiling and drove turbines and generated electricity that way. Very interesting. I don't even know if it still exists. This was in the late 90s. So between that and my experience being an investment banker to utilities and independent power generators, which is the unregulated side of the business, I know probably more than 99% of the people out there about this particular subject, renewable energy and power generation in general. And generally, as I watch TV, as I read the newspaper, as I look at various people's opinions, I am really aghast at the naivete and ignorance that many people, particularly in the media and also in politics, the lack of knowledge that these people have about the nature of power, how power is supplied, how a power generation grid actually works, how power actually gets to your home, how you're able to use cellular phones, electric cars, anything that uses electricity. And we all know that we are completely and totally dependent on the generation and use of electricity. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this and give some of the benefit of the experience that I've had both in the past and recently, so that I can dispel a lot of the utter and complete ignorance which most if not all of these politicians have with respect to how the power grid actually works, etc., and relate it in some way back to what's going on in Texas. Okay. While renewable energy, wind and solar, did not solely cause the complete disaster that's happening in Texas right now, the environmental movement, along with the green power movement, contributed significantly to what is going on there, and I'll explain why. Okay? Historically, and particularly when I was in the power business, base load capacity, which is basically the reliable part of the generation portfolio, so to speak, was always historically coal, nuclear, and then they used to use gas, mostly natural gas, mostly for what's called peaking power. In other words, you'd have your base load capacity, which had a very high, what they call reliability factor. In other words, it was extremely reliable. And then to the extent that, like in the summer, when everyone was running their air conditioners, they would turn on and off these gas generators because they were highly dispatchable, which means you can turn them on and off quickly, which you can't do with coal and nuclear, right? But over the past 20 years, the environmental movement and the Green New Deal movement in its various forms have taken more and more coal and nuclear offline, and gas has been forced into the role of playing a much bigger role in baseload capacity, right? It is plentiful, it is cheap, it is relatively favorable to the environment relative to coal, certainly. And coupled with that, coupled with the increase in gas as baseload, it's, through government mandates and all these politicians jumping on the bandwagon to put wind and solar into the mix, it's gradually eroded the reliability of the grid. And while there is definitely a place for wind and solar in the generation portfolio, they are highly unreliable. In other words, you can only generate power from wind when the wind is blowing, obviously, and you can only generate power from solar when the sun is out. So when it gets extremely cold out and the turbines freeze and there's 2 feet of snow on the solar panels, you ain't gonna get no electricity out of that. And what's basically happened in the case of Texas is, through these green initiatives over the past 20 years, approximately 25% of their generation was wind and solar. So the wind and solar completely shut down, and at the same time, the freezing cold weather froze up many of the gas pipelines and many of the gas generators. And so what happened is the power came down all of a sudden. No renewables, nothing. And at the same time, because these green initiatives have made us much more reliant on gas as baseload, when the gas lines froze, though many of that capacity shut down too. Okay, so if there's one thing you can understand from this video, and if there's one thing that I wish the masses understood, okay, and the idiots and the morons on television and in Congress, like, okay, I'll say it, like AOC. I mean, this woman knows nothing about the subject that she's talking about, yet she has a very strong opinion. And, if these very strong opinions had no effect and no enormous implications towards people and people's lives, it would be fine. I wouldn't care. But when people do not know what they're talking about, when they have no knowledge of the subject, and they are making decisions and imposing their completely illogical and ill-informed views on the rest of society with enormous consequences, as can be seen in Texas, then we have a problem. So AOC and the rest of you idiots in Washington and in the local governments that are pushing green initiatives and the Green New Deal, take a couple of weeks, read a couple of books, okay? I assume you can still read a book. Read a couple of books, educate yourself as to how these things work, and understand and realize that renewable energy will never solve our energy problems, because it will never, at least wind and solar, will never be able to be baseload capacity to provide the grid with basically what energy we need to drive this extremely energy-rich lifestyle that we've all become accustomed to and that nobody wants to give up. Quit lying to people, quit creating falsehoods, and I hope that, as horrible as this Texas situation is, that people will take the time. I know most people won't, because most people are lazy. Most people would rather have a extremely strong opinion based on nothing, because they're intellectually lazy, than to spend 3 seconds trying to learn what the truth is about these things, and have their opinions be based on some semblance of reality. They'd rather just have a very strong opinion and then only look at things and learn things that support their already arrived at opinion. Now look, everybody, unless you really have a serious mental problem, loves the environment. I mean, I love the environment. I'm a big skier. I ski. I love to be outside. I love to camp. No one loves the environment more than me, and no one wants to find energy sources that are favorable to the environment. Nobody wants to find that more than me. But your views have to be based on reality and an understanding of how these things actually work, okay? And if you were truly concerned about CO2 going into the air and about climate change, you would be a strong backer of nuclear, because nuclear is the only energy source that A, is capable of providing baseload capacity, and B, is completely carbon neutral. Completely. Now you have to get rid of the radioactive waste, and that is something that we have to make sure is completely safe. But nuclear is the only carbon neutral form of generation that we know of now that can serve as baseload capacity and has the reliability factor necessary to provide us with the baseload capacity that we need to maintain our lives, and also our way of life, and all of these luxuries that we have developed over time and become accustomed to. So anyway, that's my soapbox for Friday. I hope you learned something from this. I will probably do a formal video at some point that talks about renewable energy and talks about how things actually work on an electric grid, in the hopes of at least a few people watching this and learning more about it, so that when and if you have an opinion on it, you can speak intelligently on it, and it's not just based on hearsay or something that you hear on television from the media, which is completely biased, or from idiot politicians that are just trying to get votes and really know nothing about what they're talking about. All right? So thank you again. I appreciate it. Happy Friday. Everybody have a great weekend, and please subscribe and like this if you've got some value out of it. And at some point it might stop snowing here, and I won't have to plow my driveway again. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care and have a great weekend.